So now let's move on to the other way that supply can be affected, which is a change in supply. And I mentioned that that's basically a shift of the entire curve. So we're not just jumping from one point to the next on a curve. Now we're going to be shifting the entire curve. So all of the points on the curve are going to get shifted. So you got price here, and then we got quantity supplied. So I've mentioned this before, but if we shift the curve to the right, what's going to happen? Well, initially at this price, we had this quantity supplied. But if we shift the curve to the right, then notice at that same price, that quantity supplied is going to go up. So if we shift the curve right, that's basically an increase in supply. And as I mentioned, change in supply is going to be affected by multiple factors, which I'm going to go over in a sec. But when I'm talking about all these factors in this specific video, and I'm saying there's an increase in supply, what I'm saying is that there's a shift of that supply curve to the right. And then notice if we shift the curve to the left, then at that price, notice that, right, that quantity supplied is going down. So a shift of the supply curve to the left means there's a decrease in overall supply. So changing quantity supply, the previous video, I was moving up and down the curve. We were keeping the curve kind of static. Versus here, now there's going to be factors that we're going to talk about that's going to shift the entire curve, either right or left. So the first factor we'll talk about is a change in input prices. And sometimes instead of input prices, you'll see textbooks say factor prices. The way I like to think of inputs or factors is basically the raw materials that you use to make your product. So let's say that you have a candy factory and the biggest ingredient you're using is sugar in your candy. And so you need to go buy sugar from another supplier. You take that sugar, put it through your factory, it produces candy, and then you take that candy and then you sell it in the market. Well, what's going to happen, so sugar is an input or a factor for your product. So what's going to happen if that sugar price goes up? Well, maintaining the same budget, keeping that static, keeping all other variables static, if the sugar price goes up, notice that your production costs are going to go up, so you're not going to be able to produce as much candy. And so, just in general, if input prices increase, then what that means is there's going to be higher production costs, and so there's going to be a respective decrease in supply. So that curve is going to shift to the left, versus if input prices go down and you maintain all other variables constant, well, with that same budget, you can now buy more sugar, make more candy, so there's going to be an increase in supply. Okay, so that supply curve is going to shift to the right. Now, the second factor is a change in fiscal policy. So that's more so what the government's doing. And the two biggest things that they talk about when they talk about fiscal policy in terms of change in supply is either tax, sometimes you'll see this called duty as well, like import tax if you're importing a product, and subsidy. Right? And to just simplify both of these, basically a tax or an import duty tax, this is basically the government taking money from you as a producer. Right? So they're taking money from you versus a subsidy. If they're subsidizing production, the government would be giving you money. Right? Just in general, that is what's happening. So if the government wants less of a product, let's say, maybe in their area, they'll increase the tax for producers. And if they want more of a product, they might subsidize it. So they might give money to producers to produce more of it. So what's going to increase production costs from these two things? Well, either a higher tax, that's going to increase production costs, or if a producer has a certain subsidy and then the government lowers it, that's going to increase production costs as well. So a higher tax or a lower subsidy increases production costs, so that would then mean a decrease in supply. So that curve, that supply curve, would shift left, versus if there's lower tax and or a higher subsidy, government is giving you more money as a producer, then that's going to lower production costs, and so you're going to be able to produce more. There's going to be an increase in supply, which is going to shift that curve to the right. Now, the third factor is a change in technology, and technology really goes only one way. So it really only improves. So improvement in technology, what that's going to do for a producer is either bring their production costs down or allow them to produce more output, right? So both of them are kind of connected. So an improvement in technology, just overall, it lowers production costs. And so that's going to increase the supply of a product. It's going to shift that supply curve to the right. And then usually it doesn't go the other way. So usually technology isn't going backwards. So that case is usually not written. I'm not going to write it either. So when we're talking about a change in technology, it's usually only an improvement in technology that lowers production costs, which respectively causes an increase in supply. The fourth factor is a change in the price of alternative goods. And what alternative goods are basically other goods that you could produce as a producer. So let's say that you right now produce running shoes. Let's say that you can produce running shoes or dress shoes. Either or, doesn't matter. And let's say that currently running shoes are selling for 100, dress shoes are selling for 100, and you're producing 1,000 running shoes and then 1,000 dress shoes. Right? So you're splitting up the resources in half. So let's say that, let's call one of these the original product. Let's say the running shoes are the original product, and then dress shoes are the alternative product. Well, what's going to happen if the price of the dress shoes go up in the market to 150? Okay, so before they were even, but now the dress shoes, the price of dress shoes goes up 150, the running shoes stay at 100. Well, as a producer, you're trying to maximize profits, so what you're going to do is you're going to take these resources that are being used to produce these 1,000 units of running shoes, and you're going to put them all towards the dress shoes to produce 1,000 units here, 1,000 extra units here, because you're going to make more money with that higher price. And so if the alternative, if the price of the alternative good increases, then from the original goods perspective, there's going to be a decrease in supply. You're going to produce less. So there's going to be a decrease in supply of original good, of the running shoes, if the dress shoes go up in price, and there's going to be an increase in supply of the alternative good. Right? You're going to produce more of the dress shoes. Right, so that's the relationship right there. And then if the price of the alternative good decreases, so let's say instead of 100, it was 80, went down to 80, now you're going to do the opposite. You're going to take these resources, putting towards running shoes to sell them at that higher price of 100. So then there's going to be a decrease in supply, or there's going to be an increase in supply of the original good, the running shoes, if the dress shoes go down in price, and there's going to be a decrease in supply of the dress shoes or the alternative good. Right? So that's how a change in price of alternative goods can affect that supply curve. And then number 5, the 5th factor, is future expectations. And when we're talking about future expectations for a change in supply, we're looking at the price, the expected price of the good or service in the future. So if there is an expected price increase, so let's say you're a home builder, and in your specific area where you're building homes, you feel like the prices are going to continue to increase in the future. Well, then you're going to be more motivated to build more homes. So expected price increase in the future, that means that there's going to be an increase in supply now. Right? Producers are going to be more motivated to supply quantity. So it's going to shift that curve, that entire curve to the right. And then if there's an expected price decrease, so if you feel that prices for your product are going to go down in the future, there might be a decrease in supply. Because if the prices are going down, the revenue is going down. And so if you keep the cost the same, then the profit is going down. And so you want to try to maximize the profit as a producer. So if you feel the prices are going to decrease, that supply curve is going to shift to the left. And then finally, market size. Now this one's a little bit unique, this last factor, because when we're talking about market size, we have to look at it from the view of the market. So the other factors, we're able to look at the view of a single producer. We could have also looked at a group of producers if we wanted to, but market size, we're looking at the overall market. So this factor here, it's not from a single producer's perspective. Okay, when we're talking about this factor, a change in market size, we're looking at the market supply. Okay, so how we talked about that supply curve can have different scales. We're looking at the market supply curve. And so just from the market's perspective, if there's an increase in producers of a product, well, pretty intuitive, there's going to be an increase in overall market supply. So it's going to shift that curve to the right. And if there's a decrease in producers, if there's less producers, okay, so the amount of suppliers making CDs these days, right, that went down a lot with digital music now being the trend. A decrease in producers in a market, it's going to decrease that overall market supply. And so it's going to shift that supply curve to the left. And that's pretty much it for supply. So to do a quick little review of this whole section, we started talking about supply. Remember, supply is from the producer's point of view, the quantity that they're willing to produce of a product at a given price. And we talked about how supply can be affected in 2 different ways. There could be a change in quantity supply, so we're moving along the curve. There's only one factor for that, which is price. And it's explained with the law of supply. As price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. As price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. And then we dug in deeper of why that law of supply happens. And it happens because producers are trying to maximize profit and they have limited resources. And then we also described in this portion why that supply curve is a curve and why it's not linear. And then the other way supply can be affected is with a change in supply. So if that entire supply curve shifts either left or right, and that was affected by multiple factors. So change in input prices, change in fiscal policy, change in technology, change in price of alternative goods, future expectations, and then market size, change in market size. And then we dug in a little deeper into all 6 of these factors of how they shift that curve left or right. And now what we're going to do in the next section is we're going to take the demand curve, we're going to take the supply curve, and now we're going to combine them and then see what happens when we combine both of those curves and what the effects in the market are with the combination of both of them.